The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hi everybody, I'm Kim Hachiya. Welcome to Live and Learn. As usual, I'd like to thank our friends at LNK-TV and at Aging Partners for producing the show. It's really a pleasure to work with these professional people here. My guest today is Michael James. Michael's a retired professor from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And we're going to be talking today about his journey with his late wife as together they navigated her diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And Michael has written a memoir called Dear Judy, a love story written by Alzheimer's. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book, but more about kind of what Michael learned during this process and maybe some advice that he might have for people that are in his shoes someday, which we hope most of us don't ever have to do. But we also know that as our population ages, that is going to be something that more people are going to be facing. So thank you for being here, Michael.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Kim.
Yeah. So this is really a lovely book. It's very intimate and very emotional and moving. I really enjoyed it, which sounds weird to enjoy a book about something like this, but I did. Judith was diagnosed in 2019, correct?
No, in 2009.
Oh, that's right, 2009. And she died in 2015.
Correct.
And in between there were triumphs, but there were a lot of challenges. And you document them in this book. So it's kind of a memoir and a how-to manual, but really, who did you write it for?
Well, I first and foremost had caregivers in mind, family caregivers, and especially spousal caregivers, and even more precisely, husband caregivers or partner caregivers, because the challenges for any caregiver are enormous with a disease like this, for which there is a fairly weak societal understructure, of support. And so I wrote a book that would show what that journey looks like.
Right.
So somebody entering into it who, like me, had no clue what was ahead of them would be able to get a sense, at least in one couple's experience, of how this journey might play out.
Right. I know that you and I chatted a couple of weeks ago about this.
Yeah.
And you freely admit that you had some level of privilege because you had good insurance, you had a job that allowed you to be flexible and take time, and you had a very equitable relationship with Judith. Yeah. But and not everybody has that.
And all those things are huge benefits.
Right.
If you have those capacities.
Yes.
But most people don't.
Most people don't. And also I think most people, rightly or wrongly, don't think of men in the caregiver role. And that's an interesting thing too. And
often men aren't acculturated to assume that role with any measure of skill or competence. And so it's a steep learning curve, both in terms of the disease and also in terms of managing a household, if they haven't done all of that. Being the person responsible for cleaning, cooking, shopping, all that stuff, because all of those skills that once were the partners, once that disease progresses, the partner loses the capacity to fulfill those roles.
Right.
And it falls on
the caregiver
the spouse. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that you, one of the more poignant stories in the book was when you had to take her keys away, the car keys.
Yeah, that's a huge obstacle for anybody in this journey, because we all have this allegiance to our car and our keys and the independence that affords. And it's enormously symbolic when the person with the disease is faced with having that independence removed. But it's also inevitable. It has to be done. And one of the things I think about a disease like Alzheimer's, it is much better to know ahead what some of these challenges are going to be and prepare for them. Because when it comes to a push comes to shove moment, it becomes urgent, and that's always a bad sort of environment in which to make decisions.
Right.
And I hope that the book will give people a sense of, over time, if they're facing a journey like this, or they're close to someone who is, they'll have a better sense of what they can get ready, what they can put in place so that it's there when they need it.
Yeah, you and I talked about how knowing early on that perhaps Judith or any person in that situation is probably or maybe going to end up in some sort of a facility is to do a little bit of advanced research rather than the day before you need it,
Yeah.
having to, in a panic, just pick
Yeah.
something out. And
People all seem to agree that they would like to live out their lives in their homes, in their own homes. You hear people say, I want to die in my own bed. That's a lovely ideal, but it isn't always possible or practical. And with a disease like Alzheimer's, the load that the caregiving personnel have to bear just increases right to the end. And what it often does is it completely destroys the caregiver.
yeah,
And that's what you have to prepare against, because you
Right.
don't want to ever find yourself in a position where you just can't
right.
manage.
It also seems to me that in many circumstances it's for maybe the safety and well-being of the patient, him or herself, because
Absolutely.
there's systems set up in a facility that can help, lift you out of the bed or get you to the bathroom that you don't have in your own home. And having those things available would be, although I know you can't bring in a lot of that kind of stuff, but it's also
Yeah.
in some ways easier to have it.
We touched on the expense of this, and it is, if you find yourself in this situation, you're looking at a lot of financial commitment.
Right.
And if your average salary is $56,000 or $60,000, which is the average American salary right now, you just don't have the means out of pocket to care for somebody at home,
Right.
without having to give up your job, and that, of course, becomes another big economic blow. And so I would definitely recommend that people look at long-term care insurance. We did not have that, but in fact, it was in applying for it that Judy got her initial diagnosis and was turned down as a consequence of that diagnosis. So I think if anybody out there is debating whether they should purchase long-term care insurance or not, if they can afford it, I would recommend that they
Right.
do.
Right.
But I do think also that societally, we need to figure out a better way to support families that are facing these types of very debilitating diseases.
Right. You, one of the comments that you said to me was being 100% a selfless caregiver is a bad decision.
Well,
And
because
why-
it
and why-
might
explain
put
that.
you, well, it might put you 6 feet under before your loved one. Because this is the type of disease that really demands everything over time. Initially, it's not as difficult, obviously, but as the disease progresses and the person with the disease loses all of their executive function and their ability to even manage day-to-day activities, all of that falls on the
Right.
caregiver. And if it's a spouse in the home, it can completely destroy them physically, health-wise, and also psychologically. And that's not good.
Yeah, it's because of this long-term grieving process of seeing them sort of incrementally disappear.
Right.
That would be very difficult.
You are going through this long period of ambiguous grief because you're losing the person slowly over time. Now, as negative as that sounds, there is another side to this, and it's the one of the things that I found that worked well for me was learning how to be in the moment with Judy, because past and future made much less sense to her than the present moment. And everything, all of her focus at any point in time late in the disease was in the present moment. When I learned how to be in the present moment with her, it went a lot better for me emotionally.
I know you said that that you think you've become a more compassionate and patient person. You want to talk about that?
I was never very patient. As my adulthood was I tended to be one of those sort of type A, people who wants to get it done and also wants to find a solution to the problem and blah, blah, blah. But I learned that this disease doesn't tolerate that type of person. And I gradually felt this ability to engage patients and engage compassion, grow, so that it helped me, especially in the last year, when I realized, by that point, when I realized that the end of this was in sight, and there was only one end to this
Yes.
journey, so that when it came, I was able to accept it, sort of make peace with it, and then learn from it, continue to learn from it.
And so what did you learn from it? It's probably not a lesson that you really wanted to have to, not a class you wanted to take.
Well, I learned that my fear of death was exaggerated. It wasn't as difficult or as horrifying as I'd always imagined. I'd lost my parents, certainly, but that was a different relationship.
Yes.
I really came to understand and accept the natural process of life into death, and saw in a way the beauty of it, the rightness of it. There's a sort of, it kind of confirms the life you've lived. And that I felt was really kind of enriching.
Yeah. What I think is really beautiful about this book is it gives me a window into knowing you better. And we did have kind of a professional relationship with you that was very small. But I feel like I know her.
Yeah.
And I never met Judy. But I feel, she was an artist. She was a faculty member at the university. She was a very accomplished woman who was actually, 57-ish when she was diagnosed?
She was about, I think she was 61 when she got her diagnosis, and then
which is young.
She died 6 years later.
Yeah.
So she died just shy of her 67th birthday.
Yeah.
I think, well, it's an intimate story, no question, but everybody has a story.
Right.
Every life is an interesting story if people are given the chance to tell it and if people listen.
Yeah.
I happened to write it down because I hoped that it might be helpful to anybody who is close to something like this in whatever capacity. And I would say to family members or close friends of people who get a diagnosis like this, you can make a big difference. Know what your friends or your family are going to go through, and figure out ways that you can help. And it doesn't take much. Offer to take the person for a walk around the neighborhood. Offer to take them to a local park. Find out what they enjoyed doing in their spare time, and give them opportunities to do that, to relieve the primary caregiver for at least a short period of time.
Right.
Because a block of 2 or 3 hours without the caregiving, the hands-on active piece of caregiving for a caregiver is huge.
Yeah, it's a gift.
Yeah, it's a huge gift.
Yeah.
And when you consider how much hourly in-home caregiving costs, upwards of $25 an hour, if you give a family member or a close friend 3 hours of your time that they can be off doing whatever or go play a round of golf or whatever it happens to be, there's $75 gift.
You know what, we're out of time. And you and I can and have talked about this for hours. And
Right.
I really thank you for being here and sharing this story. And I know your book is available online or at the...
It's available through the publisher, Pine Eden Press,
Okay.
so pineedenpress.com.
Okay,
It's also available locally at Francie and Finch Bookstore
perfect.
and at Barnes & Noble,
Oh,
South
good.
Point.
Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Yep.
And thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
Kim.
being here. I really appreciate it.
I do
I want to
too.
remind our guests that it's never too late to live and learn.